Proficiency and our new SIS. On Saturday, actually Michelle and Bessie and Sandy and I were all in a class together about visionary leadership, and the professor spoke to the importance of having clear vision and knowing where you're going, so that all the work that you're doing makes sense in light of the end result. And so I think Shay's done a great job of creating that vision for us as a district and clarifying here are the four components that we need to transform the work that we're doing in Redmond School District. I don't know if you remember that fun activity that we did last year where we took some paper airplanes and we tried to throw them across the room and make them in a trash can. And the first time we threw our airplanes and we tried to make them in, and Shay said, okay, now stop, I want you to make some adjustments to your airplane. And we all made adjustments and tried to make it in the basket. And then lastly, he asked us to take our airplanes and crumple them up into a ball and throw them into the trash can. And that was kind of Shay's analogy for what we mean when we talk about transforming the district. It's not just making subtle changes here or there, but actually trying to rethink how we deliver education as a district. And one of the key points that we're going to talk to today is the idea of how we use proficiency, coming to alignment and understanding of the definition of that, and also how it fits in with our new SIS. I know right now it might seem like, what does an SIS have to do with proficiency? But I think it has a lot to do with proficiency, because what proficiency ultimately is about is ensuring that every kid is working to their highest level of rigor and the expectations there for students. And in our current system, we don't have some of the tools that we need to make that happen. And so some of the dots I want to connect for you today are how the SIS is going to help us deliver on some of the resources and tools that we need to make this happen that we don't currently have. So first, I just want to, I'm going to start here talking about proficiency and clarifying a few things. For some of us, we've heard some of these phrases, and this might not all be new information. A lot of it might just be clarification. There might be some new points along the way. But we've begun to talk about proficiency as students know what, know why, and know how. That it's not enough that they just know the information, but we're moving to a system where we're asking kids to do something with what they know. And what does that look like? We can sometimes see that on individual levels where a good teacher here or there will be doing something like, oh, okay, I think that's what it means. But how do we do that system-wide across our schools in our district? So we're not just making slight adjustments here or there, but we're actually changing the work. And I think the fundamental understanding we need to have as we begin to talk about proficiency is it's not an addition to all these things we're already doing. Really what proficiency is about is having teachers walk in their classroom and fundamentally view their job as something different than they currently do. It's not about just delivering content. It's not about just covering standards. It's not about just giving tests. It's viewing all the things that we might currently be doing in a different way. And that's important because we know that there's a lot of initiatives that happen. New state tests, new mandates, but the real work that transforms what we do is the work that happens when teachers are in front of kids. And so that's what the heart of proficiency is about. It's about getting to the point. And the point is great teaching in front of our kids, and what does that look like? And so I hope to today kind of illustrate that. And so I want to speak just briefly to 3 points this morning, and they're in the work that Shay started last year in that trifold that you got today, which you've seen. And so this language won't necessarily be new, and this should look familiar in some of your mini observations and things like that. This language should be pretty consistent. So I'm going to lay out the 3 basic tenets or components of proficiency and then drill down into each of those, and hopefully for you, help you to understand the what, the why, and the how for each of these components as we walk through today. So the first one being that we must have learning objectives that are clear and measurable. As we'll talk to those in a second. That we also need to have students working toward mastery. Not just working, not just busy, but working towards mastery. And what does that look like in a classroom? I think that today we'll hopefully have some good examples of what that is. And then lastly, that assessment is meaningful and drives student learning. And so each of these 3, as you read and study and think about even the old literature or new literature, these are the 3 components that really will help teachers to see their job as fundamentally different and help us as leaders know how to lead on those pieces. So I'm going to drill down into briefly the learning objectives are clear and measurable. This isn't a new concept for us. We've talked a lot about it as a district, and most districts and teachers have had these conversations. There's a lot of books about standards and priority standards. So the question I think we need to answer for ourselves is, how does Proficiency view this as something different? What's unique about this in light of Proficiency? In a traditional system, I think a lot of teachers, and even back when I was doing my student teaching and first started teaching, there was emphasis on having standards in our work. But I think we asked the wrong question. We began to ask the question, okay, does the teacher understand the learning objectives? Are they clear to the teacher? Well, the teacher might post the learning objectives on the board. They might even have learning objectives on their assignments, tests, or projects. But in a proficiency-based system, what we're saying is the learning objectives need to be crystal clear to the students. So that's one fundamental shift is, okay, it's clear to the teacher, that's fine, but we need to move to a point where it's clear to the students that we need to teach to, assess to, and report progress to our objectives, our learning objectives. I think as leaders, it can be difficult sometimes. We see in pockets of this happening, but how system-wide are we going to make changes so that we ensure that kids know the learning objectives, that they've mastered those, that they understand what's going on? And if you were to ask me my personal opinion, and my opinion is based on lots of other people's opinion who are a lot smarter than I am, but that is that if we don't ever get to the point that we report feedback by standard to kids, it's virtually impossible to really know if that's happening system-wide in our schools and in our system. We can pop in and ask teachers to be doing this and that, but until we get to the point where we have a tool to report out by standards for kids, it's very difficult to know that. So it's essential that we get to this point where we can provide feedback on those essential standards, the learning objectives, so that they're clear and measurable. So I'm going to walk you through just a quick analogy of why that's important, so you kind of understand from a proficiency-based system why this is so important. And I'm just going to I'm going to spend tons of time on this analogy. Some of you have seen this before. But draw a quick analogy between a physician and their patient and a teacher and their student and how they provide feedback. Why I like the analogy of a physician and a patient and a teacher and a student is because it represents, I think, the necessary urgency that obviously when you're sick, you need help, right? You go to the doctor, you want to know what's wrong, there's something going on, you want to make sure that you're going to get better and get better quick. I think we need to have the same sense of urgency when we talk about providing feedback to our kids, that the academic health of our students is vital. And for them to get healthy, we got to provide the kind of feedback they need to get better. So obviously, general feedback is not sufficient when you take your kid to the doctor. I took my 9-month-old to the doctor last week because she was sick for the first time, lost some sleep. She was crying a lot. It's never fun to see your kid sick. Your heart kind of aches for them. You want to make sure that they're going to get better. So you take them to the doctor, and the doctor gives you some feedback. But if you were to get this kind of feedback at the doctor's office, you would never be satisfied. You would be like, okay, yeah, but what does that really mean? I mean, it's intuitive that at this critical issue, you'd want to know the details of what the issues are with your son or daughter. And that's not my 9-month-old daughter, by the way. So overall health is a C-. What you expect from your doctor, the doctor is going to do some specific things. They're going to have some outcomes and some measures that they're going to do to make sure they pinpoint what the issues are in the academic or in